Just ignore that stuff.
Okay, just a little bit. I'm not-
I'm in there. I'm in there.
All right, good evening, everyone. I want to welcome you to the work session for the City Council for the City of Wildwood for Monday, June 22nd, 2020. Ms. Eldridge, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Bullen,
Here.
Councilmember Stevens,
Here.
Councilmember McCune. Here. Councilmember Boat,
Present.
Councilmember Bertolino,
Here.
Councilmember Dodwell. Councilmember Remy,
Here.
Councilmember Edens. Councilmember Brost.
Here.
Councilmember Garitano,
Here.
Councilmember Werther,
Present.
Councilmember Jordan. Councilmember McCutcheon. Here. Councilmember Farmer. Councilmember Dillard. Councilmember Bartoni. Councilmember Gargnani.
Okay, did you hear Councilmember Dillard? I did not hear him.
I am here.
Okay, thank you. Just a couple of housekeeping items. This is the meeting where we are transitioning back into in-person meetings. And so essentially tonight we need to do both Zoom and in-person. So that means that the microphones that we used to use that are in front of you when we were in person, you'll need to use those tonight, make sure they're on when you're speaking, as well as the Zoom mute, unmute feature. So those who are participating and listening by Zoom can hear you. And when you're not, I would just ask, secondly, when you're not speaking, if you could please keep those of you in the chambers, and we have several this evening that are that have the Zoom on in front of you, if you could keep the volume down as much as you can and still hear, that would be appreciated so that we don't get echoes and reverb on that. Next, I'd like to introduce again the intern who's been shadowing me, Trey Trapani. Welcome, Trey. He's from Ward 7. He's a sophomore at Lafayette High School. And welcome, glad to have you with us this evening. Moving next to informational items before we go to action items, we have 9. Before we go to action items, is there any item under information that any member of the council would like to discuss, ask a question about, or so forth? Councilmember Brost.
I'd just like to mention that I chatted back and forth with Chris Day, and he indicated that to date there's been about 150 installations under the new internet. He indicated on average that people are receiving about a speed of about. I'm sorry, people out. I'll start over. I didn't unmute.
That's fine, go ahead.
But I talked to Chris Bay, and he indicated that there's been about 150 people sign up for the new service. I asked him if he has any ideas of the experience people are getting. And he says what he's hearing is that it could be exceeding the 15 megabyte download, maybe by 2. What I've experienced is anywhere from probably 10 to 85. And that really depends on the time of day. Very early in the morning, before everybody gets up, sometimes I start working and it's very high, but there are peak times. But overall, it's much better than what we're experiencing with Whisper. So I just would give that update.
Thank you. And by way of background, my understanding, Councilmember Roast, is that you were definitely in a difficult area of Ward 1 relative to signal previously with what you had. Is that correct?
Yeah, we were basically Whisper worked, but not all the time.
Okay.
And we could never which we don't anyway, but stream movies and all that. It would have, but So it's much better. A number of my neighbors are signing up. So I'll get more feedback, but, my fingers are crossed.
Excellent. Great. Well, thank you for the update. Anyone else relative to items under information before we go to action items? Councilmember Edens? Sure. You do. And turn your microphone on for live stream.
Okay, I think we're good now. Sorry about that. I just wanted to thank Councilmember Remy and Chair Rick Archesky and Joe Vernich and Kathy Arnett for their work for the Watershed Erosion Task Force, and of course the rest of the committees. We made significant progress, I think, really in the last couple of months, especially with our city consultant, Dr. Hammer. So I'm very encouraged by the full report that Dr. Hammer produced. If you are a council member that is not on the Watershed Erosion Task Force, I encourage you to go through it in full and speak to your co-representative for any information that might be helpful for your board. And that's all I have to say on that. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Edens. Okay, anyone else before we go to action items? Okay, seeing none, moving into action items, we have three. First is from the Department of Planning. Joe, this is the work plan for noise code. Would you like to speak to that?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Mr. Mayor and members of City Council, the Planning and Parks Committee was asked to consider possible amendments to certain regulations in a variety of different codes. Those codes include the zoning ordinance as well as the noise code. The impetus came from a group of neighbors around the city's only aquaculture facility, and more recently, the installation of a large-scale waterfall in conjunction with a water feature on a 60-acre parcel of ground governed by a conditional use permit granted by the city. In these instances, individuals impacted by the operation of these facilities have asked for consideration. The Planning and Parks Committee had considered these items through 2017, not reaching a conclusion for a number of reasons. At this last meeting in June of this year, the Planning and Parks Committee was presented a work program by the Department of Planning for both of these current conditions, as well as looking out into the future now that we have better information relative to noise, discrete tone, etc. At the conclusion of the discussion by the committee, a motion was made to proceed forward with the investigations relative to the series of codes. It is just solely an investigation. The intent is to provide that research to the committee members, debate the merits of any changes, and ultimately provide a recommendation to City Council. This process will take a few months based upon our meeting schedule, but tonight the committee via the department is presenting its recommendation for endorsement so that the matter can proceed forward from tonight. Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council, the department is available to respond to any questions or comments relative to the report. And the chair of the committee, Ms. McCutcheon, is in person tonight and certainly can add anything that the department may have omitted in its presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Joe, are you looking for? I know you mentioned approval of the report. Relative to the exact language of the motion, what would you be looking for the council to do this evening relative to this?
Mr. Mayor, the department would respectfully request a motion second and a vote on endorsing the investigation and allowing it to proceed to the committee and ultimately to the Planning and Zoning Commission before being presented back to City Council.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Stevens.
So one, Joe, can't the committees or the Planning and Zoning Commission decide to take these up without a vote of the council?
Certainly, Councilmember Stevens, but this particular item's been around for a number of years. In some regards, starting as far back as 2012. Steps have been taken, new legislation passed by City Council, and the thought was on the part of the department and committee that since we just had finished looking at these particular matters, it might be best to let the City Council know what we're doing.
Okay, and then second, there's another resident in Ward 2 that I've talked with that he had his own issues with noise ordinances and neighbors, and typically these things come up whenever you have a problem. What is the best way for that gentleman to, I don't know, at least make his voice heard or to try to get a code change if he thinks that there should be a change to the noise ordinance?
Well, it's an opportune time, Councilmember Stevens, and with the permission of the chair of the Planning and Parks Committee, if the gentleman would like to contact me either via email or telephone, we'll certainly solicit any input he would like to provide, and we'll make it available to the committee members and eventually the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council.
And do you know when, so after, if there's a vote this evening, when that will be back on the agendas for the Planning and Parks or Planning and Zoning?
I was hoping to have something back to Planning and Parks Committee either July, but no later than August. Again, it just depends on some of the other items that are outstanding on the agenda, and then to the commission in the fall.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilmember McCune.
Did the chair want to speak before I proceed?
There was no question. Joe just finished his report and wanted to know if you had anything to add as chair of Planning and Parks.
I support the recommendation from the committee.
Thank you, Councilmember McCutcheon.
I'm going to make the motion to move forward as Joe.
So we have a motion to move forward made by Councilmember McCune, seconded by Councilmember Dodwell, to move forward endorsing the report that's been presented with the idea of proceeding to the Planning and Zoning Commission as our Director of Planning, Mr. Vintage, has suggested. Is there any discussion on the motion? Councilmember Bartoni?
Joe, just for clarification, we're just voting for research and investigation, no action at this point, correct?
That's correct, sir. Thanks for clarifying.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, seeing none, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Moving next to replacement of ash trees. This was on the agenda for the council previously and I believe was postponed. Rick, is there anything further you want to mention relative to this item?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mayor and council members, I don't have anything additional to add. I would note that Andy Berg with Davey Tree is with us on the meeting Zoom, so he's available for any questions. Again, we would like to go forward with the preparation of legislation to enter into the agreements with these three contractors to address the demise of our ash trees. Available for any questions that may arise from the council about this issue.
So Rick, the question for you would be, you're looking for, and tell me if this is correct, a motion from the council to move forward with your recommendation relative to the treatment and removal, treatment, and replacement of ash trees. Is that correct?
Correct. It would be a motion to prepare the legislation for the city contractor agreements for the project.
Prepare legislation. All right. So that is the request from our Department of Public Works. Councilmember Stevens.
What was the final decision from the admin Public Works on this, the subcommittee?
No.
City Administrator Hanson will address that question.
Thank you, Councilmember Stevens. The Admin Public Works Committee discussed the idea and presented that list of capital items that recommended that to be frozen. But according to Robert's Rules of Order, motion from the Admin Public Works Committee cannot trump an action by City Council. And because this item was brought to City Council for a decision, City Council needs to either decide to move forward with the preparation of legislation, or they can recommend that it go back to committee. But those are, or, not proceed at all. But those are really the only three options at this point.
What was the motion from council? Was it to postpone but not refer? Is that right?
Correct. Yes, the motion was to postpone for 45 days.
Okay, and so is it your recommendation that this is unfrozen or not? Because I guess there was a memo out to the city council that this was frozen.
Yep.
So is the new recommendation to not freeze this?
Well, the memo that I originally put together had a little asterisk next to this item stating that council would need to make a decision on that within 45 days. So I included it as part of the memo, just as part of the unfunded or unspent dollars for the capital projects. And then the conversation took place at Admin Public Works. I believe Councilmember Remy made a motion to move forward with 3 of the items from the capital improvement sales tax list, but it did not include the Emerald Ash Borer. But again, the action made by Admin Public Works cannot trump a motion that's on the floor for City Council to decide.
Okay, thanks.
Welcome.
Councilmember Remy.
The administrator answered what I was listening.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Dodwell.
I just wanted to clarify for everyone, can you hear me through this okay?
No,
Okay, thank you.
Mute, please.
no, cannot hear you on Zoom.
Unmute your Zoom.
Okay, we're coming off.
Unmute your Zoom.
12 different computers here.
We'll get there. It's all right.
There we go.
Perfect.
Okay, now we can speak. The admin or the Parks and Planning Committee had a discussion about the fact that while this would be nice to do right now, it's my recollection that at least a portion of us had stated that we didn't think that this needed to move forward this year, even though we want to take care of the ash borer situation and remove any trees that might have already succumbed to these insects. We didn't feel like with our current budget horizon, we didn't know whether we could afford to do that this year. So we wanted to put it on hold until next year. But that has to be a vote of the council at this point.
So just for information for the council's benefit, there are a couple of options here. One option would be for any member of the council to make a motion and it would need to be in the affirmative to approve the recommendation from the Department of Public Works relative to this item. And then the council could vote up or down. Another option would be for a member of the council to make a motion to postpone this to a time that you believe would be something you would prefer. Councilmember Dodwell?
I didn't have a chance to finish
My apologies.
sentence, but I was going to make the motion that we postpone this to next spring so that we ensure that we cover other necessary items for this year.
Okay, so with your permission, would we say the second meeting in March?
Second meeting in March for 2021.
Okay.
We want to bring this back forward so that we can get it out and approved by the first part of April. As I recall, the vendor had indicated
Dodwell, unmute, please.
April and May would be the best times to actually.
We can't hear her.
You want to make it the first meeting in March?
Yeah, let's make it the first meeting.
You're on mute still, sorry.
I didn't mute myself, but I guess it did. I would like to make a motion that we move forward with postponing this until the first meeting in March of 2021 so that we can then take this up and approve it for the spring of 2021.
Okay.
As I understand it from the vendor, it needs to be completed in April and at the latest May or June. So we want to make sure that we get this up and on the books early.
Okay, so we have a motion to postpone to the first council meeting in March of 2021. Is there a second? Councilmember Bartoni seconds. We had Councilmember Kuhn on the list next. But now we're on the motion to postpone only. So do you want to speak to postponement? Go ahead.
I just want to clarify on the postponement with Councilmember Remy on the admin. I think that this was wrapped up into one. Am I correct that we wanted to postpone this as well?
Councilmember Murray is indicating in the affirmative.
Yes.
Okay, then I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page since we have different committees. So thank you. That's all I
Thank
wanted.
you. Councilmember Edens.
Okay, so I'm going to vote against the motion to postpone, and here's why. I did speak with someone in Baldwin that's a resident, so I know for a fact that other cities around us are continuing with their removal plan. They have made some adjustments, so they're not necessarily offering immediate replacement. They're offering rebates for residents to replace them themselves. Of course, there's certainly other issues with that that's separate, but I am concerned that by kicking the can down the road, we're going to end up with twice the number of trees that we have to address on a different schedule next year. And this problem isn't going away. Sometimes it's cheaper to spend money now than it is further down the road. And I understand not wanting to do it in the pandemic, but I don't know that it's necessarily a fiscally responsible to delay it. Although I think there is an argument that it could be better in the short term for the budget, but I'd like to remind the council that this was in the original budget. So it's only about balancing it at this point with limited funds, but it was allocated originally. And I know that there was confusion with the committee. When I was part of the public works discussion, I was under the impression that this whole discussion was in council. So if I didn't share an opinion that seemed consistent, that would be due to confusion on that. So, okay.
Thank you. Councilmember McCutcheon.
I was going to second the motion.
Okay. Councilmember Stevens.
My question's been answered. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
My question was answered. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Brost.
Yeah, if the timing is April, maybe as late as May or June, I guess if the individual from Davy Tree could comment as to, could it even be done this year? And also the impact if we wait till next year.
Okay, without objection, we'll hear from the representative. Would you like to comment on that question from Councilmember Brost?
Sure, yeah. As far as timing goes, we still have a little time. We could, with the weather that we're dealing with right now, I think we could do this into mid-July, no later than mid-July. And I spoke with our potential contractor who would be willing to do that in mid-July. Just to comment further, my worry is that next season we would not be able to treat, because from what I've seen in town is that the devastation has already have begun this year. So I'm worried that treatment next year will not be an option.
And I have a question for you, Mr. Berg, related to what we just said. What is your opinion, and I'm asking you to speculate, but in your professional opinion, if this matter is postponed, what, if anything, would that do to the price? In other words, would the price stay the same? Can you guarantee that as we sit here tonight, or would it go down, or would it go up? And if in either direction, by how much?
I think we'd have to defer to the contractors that provided us bids in the RFP and allow them to rebid or re-estimate their costs. But I would imagine they would stay consistent from what they provided us already.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Garetano.
Part of my question's been answered, so thank you, Andy, for providing. Oh, okay, so is that better now? Okay, Andy, thank you for answering part of my question, which was in regards to how much time we have. So what I'm hearing is we have a little more time. Now, we're driven to this because of concerns over the budget. And what we know so far at this time is that the figures for April, which we were waiting for, show that the city has collected 13% less in revenue, which overall cumulatively we're under budget by a total of $10,000. However, we have also canceled events and other functions during this time, which I believe was a total of about 80,000 in savings. So if my math is correct, and I'll ask Mr. Anselm to provide some confirmation or clarify, as of now, we are ahead from a budgetary perspective. The city has not lost any money. In fact, it has gained money from savings. However, that does not change what could happen when we get our May figures. So knowing that, I would like to postpone at least until we can get the May figures, and I'll ask City Administrator Anselm when we should expect those. And if we could do that, maybe we can make a decision to address it still this year while there's still time for Andy to be able to take care of it.
So typically we receive figures for the previous month around the 15th of every month. So I would anticipate about July 15th, we'll be able to hear those. Around July 15th, we should be able to get the numbers for May.
Speaking with specific figures, the math that I cited, that cumulatively from a revenue perspective, we were only under budget by 10,000. That does not reflect the savings of about $80,000 the city has saved. So roughly we have a net gain of $70,000 at this time, which is a good position to be in. But I think we should wait to see what May comes back with, and if that works and it could still be addressed this year, then we can make that decision hopefully sooner. I would, and I would like to seek perhaps City Administrator Anselm can tell us a better date that would work, or a recommendation.
City Administrator.
Yeah, obviously we won't have the numbers available by the first meeting in July, but we would have the numbers available for the second meeting in July.
Would that work?
Would that work for the vendor to be able to do that if we make a decision after the second week of July?
Mr. DeBrey, could you please respond to Councilor Garitano's question?
The vendor we would be electing to go with is our low bid selection in Kansas City. I don't know how quickly they'd be able to mobilize. After speaking with Rick, I did ask them if you guys passed it in legislation 2 weeks from now, would they be able to get down here or over here by mid-July? They said they could make that happen. Again, for the efficacy of the product, if we're waiting until, after late July, then I wouldn't be too confident in the treatments.
Okay. So, Mr. Berg, I'm sorry to do this to you. We got to get a yes or no. Is a postponement to the second meeting in July, is that workable within the framework of what's been proposed at this point or not?
If it's postponed to the second meeting in July, when would we have the green light to proceed? By the second week of July, you're saying?
Potentially, there could be a double reading. So let's just assume that that you'd be good to go after the second meeting in July.
Yes, I'd still be confident in that.
Okay.
Can I say something, Mr. Mayor?
So in that case, then I would make that amendment that we revisit this or change the date till middle or second meeting of July.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second to that motion? Seconded by Councilmember McCune. So now the debate is only on the date, and then we're going to go back to the motion to postpone and then the main motion. Councilmember, we have Councilmember Bertolino next on the list. Councilmember Bertolino, okay, you're going to take a pass. Councilmember McCune on the date only, take a pass. Councilmember Dodwell, only as to the date, take a pass. All right, anyone else wish to speak on the date only? Councilor Remy?
So I'm just on the date. So I'm just trying to decipher whether or not to postpone to this date or not. And I just wanted to make sure. So the last time we spoke about the bids for this
so we can understand this. The bids get just for tree removal, because we talked about in the meeting whether we would remove them, whether we would do treatment, whether we do half and half. And so I think it's important for us to just show those numbers tonight if we're going to make a vote on this. And we have those, so we can pull them up and share them if maybe the city administrator would be amenable to that, because it would be helpful for us to see if we postpone for this season or wait until March to postpone, based on, because the cost of tree removal probably won't change, but we may have to actually remove more trees. So if this is an admin public works, correct? So yeah, I think the meeting, we had the original one back in 2019, January. And then we've had one since then where we had the new proposal.
Okay, so Councilor Remy, is your question, what's within the scope of the motion to postpone? In other words, what would the council be voting on at the second meeting in July? Is that your question, basically?
Well, yeah, I guess I'm just clarifying, if we go with Mr. Garitano's July motion, I think it's important for us to understand if we wanted to postpone even to March versus doing the July one, we should know at least what the figures are, because the whole council was privy to those numbers previously.
City Administrator Ansom, could you please provide those? Or Rick, either of you.
Just to show what's up.
One more time, could you repeat the question?
What's within the scope of what the council will be voting on in July? In other words, is it removal, and what's the general line items, and what's the cost of it?
There were 3 line items.
Yeah, I would defer to Rick. Rick should be able to have, he has that information.
Rick, can you answer that, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Mayor and council members, the recommendation tonight is only to advance the legislation to the council to enter into the city contractor agreements with the 3 low bid contractors. We would be working under the budgeted amounts for that work for 2020. We have $75,000 in the budget, so it would be used for tree removal, about $50,000 for tree removal, and we proposed about $25,000 for treatment of about 300.
So we have 50K for removal and 25K for treatment. All right, so we have clarification on that. Councilmember Stevens.
Is this still, this is still a 5-year plan for these trees, is that correct? So if we put this off until 2021, it's still a 5-year plan. So we're just pushing back everything 1 year. It's not like this is all going to be taken care of in any time soon, right?
Rick, would you care to respond to Councilmember Stevens' question, please?
Well, I think it's fair to say we envisioned a multi-year response to the Emerald Ash Borer. We have seen this spring that we are seeing the effects of it very strong now, and we definitely see trees that are dying. So I guess I would say one thing that we need to be aware of is when we get calls for trees that are dying and dead, I think the department is going to respond to those trees unless my city administrator tells me otherwise. From a safety standpoint, if we believe we need to remove a tree, we're likely to do it, and we already have budgeted amounts to do that, and a contractor in Omni to address that situation. So I don't know that we would not remove trees that are a danger or could be a hazard to anyone after they have died. But certainly this would be a multi-year response, and we've always envisioned that it would be an annual assessment that we would make based on the prior year. So we would develop the plan, and then essentially every year annually, we would reassess it and modify it as necessary. So is your, opinion that it's going to stay around this same budget for the next 5 years, 75, 80, 70, it's not like you're
we're getting off course here. So the debate is on, just bear with me 1 second. Councilor Stevens, please. The debate is between postponing to the second meeting in July or the second meeting in March. That's the limited thing. So now we're getting into budgets and year over year, and with all due respect, I think that's getting a little far. So Rick, if you just, what's your question, Councilmember Stevens? Let's see if we can get this back on track here. So.
Well, I guess with all due respect, when I look at the budget, it shows that our expenditures have exceeded revenues by $605,000 so far this year. So if we can postpone this until next year, and it's still going to be the same $75,000 to $80,000 every year for the next 5 years, then just postpone it for a year. And there's, it's still a 5-year plan. It's just put off 1 year.
Thank you. Councilmember Bartoni?
My question or comment would have to do with, might be a budget thing, just like where we're coming up with the $80,000 in savings. So is it okay to talk about that right now, or is that more appropriate at a?
Does it relate to how you would vote on the motion to amend the date to postponing this to July or March of next year?
Well, it could. So, and
you have your mic on here too?
Yes.
Okay.
So it could, because, I mean, I can appreciate if you're saving money in one area and trying to use it in another, and I don't know where the $80,000 is coming from. I'm not arguing that that's not legitimate, but that's also probably savings from events in May and June. Okay, but we're not counting any revenue from May and June yet. So, right. So we're kind of saying we're saving money, well, but we don't know how short we are on revenue either. So that's why I'm still hesitant about moving forward.
I think that was the intent of Councilor Garrett's motion to postpone to July and get that information and then make a more informed decision, I believe, not putting words in it.
And that all being said, we're told at the beginning of this discussion that we had, that the best time to treat was in May and June. Now we're looking at the earliest, the second meeting in July, which is 5 weeks from today. So you're really looking at sometime like probably the first part of August. So we're missing the target that we were told we need to hit by at least 2 to 3 months.
We are, although the gentleman who's with us, Mr. Berg, did say that he thought that would be okay. But I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
Councilmember Garrett.
All right. So yeah, my reason for amending the delay is that we could make this decision in July, and in July, either we have more information, are we driven because of the money, and therefore we have more information regarding the money in July. And if that doesn't work, then we go back to pushing it out further if we need to do that. I think the issue, and Rick started to talk about it, and I am experiencing it from residents, is that they have trees on the curb that are dying, that are maintained by the city. And so when the tree dies, the city comes to cut it. The next question you get from your resident is, when are you going to plant the new tree? My answer right now is I don't know. And they don't like that answer. So we're cutting trees, but we're not maintaining and replacing them. And so I'd like to start, that's why I'd like to make that decision in July so that we could start to provide answers to people as to when they'll start to see new trees. As far as treatment goes, well, we've heard that we have some time and that could still be done according to Andy Berg. And if not, then we'll have to delay till next year if the financial numbers are right. So that's the reason for pushing it to July.
Thank you. Councilor Edens.
Yes, I just wanted to clarify. I mean, I do understand we're on a long-term plan, but while Andy is here, maybe he can clarify if there's a good estimate of the trees that we had planned on treating. If we don't do that this year, are those trees going to move up to the replacement list? In other words, are they going to be dead and cost us more money to replace and change the timetable? And that will help me determine whether or not, the year postponement even makes sense.
Mr. Berg, would you care to respond to Councilor Edens' question, please?
Sure, yeah, I discussed this with Rick, and I kind of decided that it would probably be in the city's budget's best interest to treat this year only and then do it biannually from here, because splitting the treated population in half and treating some next year likely isn't going to work, because again, this thing has hit the city so hard and trees are now dying at an alarming rate. I don't think that we're going to be able to treat the amount we initially intended to this winter when we created this plan. We initially wanted to treat 394 ash trees, and I would have to reassess these trees prior to treatment. And I think that number might almost get cut in half by 50%. but I don't think treating next year is going to work. I think most untreated trees are going to be in decline by next year.
Okay. So would an option be to amend the postponement? Would it make sense then to go ahead and continue with just removal and not treat any of the other trees? Or go ahead and do it just to buy this time?
We can't hear
her. I'm so sorry. It automatically unmuted me again when I was done speaking. Would it make sense then if I'm to the compromising stage where something is better than nothing. So if we can't get this passed to include both treatment and removal and replace, would it make sense to go ahead and just go ahead with the removal portion and then just put off treatment at all this year? Or is that gonna get us
since the debate now needs to be just on the date, that would be germane to the main motion once we get back to it. So if I could just ask you to hold that.
Absolutely.
And see what happens with this. And then if we get to that point, it's not postponed, that's when I would ask that. Councilmember Remy, thank you. Councilmember Remy?
So I'm going to vote against the postponement by Mr. Garetano.
And I'll vote against the next one because I'll make a motion just to treat the $25,000 worth of trees so we can move forward.
So seeing nothing further, we have a motion to postpone that is.
You're muted, Mayor.
So my apology, I was muted as well. So the motion on the floor is to amend the motion to postpone to the second council meeting in July. That has been seconded. We've had the debate. Roll call vote on the motion to postpone to the date of July. And then we're going to come back to the main motion to postpone. So this is only on changing the date, not the motion to postpone and not the main motion, just the date change from July to July from March of next year. Okay, just the date. An affirmative vote is to move it from March of next year to July. And then we'll come back to the motion to postpone as amended, if it gets amended. Roll call vote, please, on that date.
Can I get clarification on who seconded that?
It was seconded by Councilmember Bartone. No, Councilmember King seconded.
Councilmember Stevens?
No.
Councilmember McCune?
Yes.
Councilmember Pope?
Yes.
Say it again. Say it again.
Yes.
Councilmember Bernardino?
Yes.
Councilmember Dodwell?
No.
Councilmember Remy?
No.
Councilmember Edens?
Yes.
Councilmember Rose?
No.
Councilmember Garetano?
Yes.
Yes.
Councilmember Worther?
No, nay.
Councilmember Jordan? I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
No.
Councilmember McCutcheon?
No.
Councilmember Farmer?
No.
Councilmember Dillard?
No.
Councilmember Bartoni?
No.
Councilmember Gragnani? I hear.
Okay, is that it? Okay. So the motion to change the date fails. We're now back to the main motion, which is to postpone to March the 2nd, but second or first meeting, Councilmember Dodwell, City Clerk, I can't remember. Second? Okay. She says second. You? What was it? Okay, the first meeting in March. So this is the motion to postpone that has not been amended with the date change to the first meeting in March of 2021. Seeing no further discussion, roll call vote on the motion to postpone to March, first council meeting 2021.
Councilmember McCune?
No.
Councilmember Pope?
No.
Councilmember Bernardino?
Councilmember Bertolino, we couldn't hear you. He's muted. Go ahead.
Councilmember Dodwell?
No.
Councilmember Remy,
No.
Councilmember Edens,
No.
Councilmember Gross,
No.
Councilmember Garitano,
No.
Councilmember Worther,
Aye.
Councilmember Jordan, Councilmember McCutcheon,
Oh, I didn't hear Councilmember Jordan.
Yes.
Councilmember McCutcheon,
No.
Councilmember Farmer,
No.
Councilmember Dillard,
Yes.
Councilmember Bartolome,
Yes.
Councilmember Bertolino,
No.
Okay, so the motion to postpone fails. We're now back to the main.
Yes.
Well, I don't think we have a motion on the floor. It was just a report that was going to be postponed. Councilmember Remy?
I'd like to make an amendment or a motion rather. I would like
Can you
to-
unmute?
Like to make a motion to
Authorize
authorize
25,000 for treatment, but not removal of the up to 75, only to 25,000. We can treat the trees, to avoid them from dying until next year. And we can deal with removal next year.
What day next year?
So that I can postpone until the March meeting.
Okay, so the first meeting in March?
Yes,
Okay.
we would authorize the $25,000 for treatment. We'd postpone the second part, which is removal until March, second meeting in March.
To the second or first meeting?
First meeting in March, excuse me.
Okay. Is there a second to the motion? Seconded by Councilmember Dodwell. Seeing no discussion, I'm sorry, Councilmember McCune. Councilmember Edens.
I just want to clarify that the removal will still occur for the trees that are dead or in a danger to any public property, street right of way, and will be addressed on a rolling and as needed basis. Because this did, I believe, include estimate for tree removal for those that were not eligible for treatment, but not totally and completely deceased. Is that correct, Mr. Berg?
I think Rick.
Well, I just wanted to make sure that the estimate included in trees that were not fully deceased but could not be saved in the removal budget. I'm just thinking that we're going to end up replacing all of these trees anyway, so make it a line item as opposed to them just dying and going over the tree removal budget. So.
Councilmember Garitano.
My question is for Rick. Rick, for trees that are being cut right now, will we be able to replace these trees this year? I'm talking about a resident that had their tree cut in the enclave. They want to know when they'll be able to get it replaced.
Councilmember Garitano, as part of the budgeting for this year, we had to make some very hard choices at the last minute. And one of the things that we did not budget for was replanting. So right now there are no funds budgeted directly for replanting this year. However, Andy Berg did submit a grant request through the Missouri Department of Natural Resources, which would allow for some very limited replanting this year if we are successful with that grant application. I think that's really the option we have right now, is to wait to see if our grant application is successful or not. And if it is, then we may have the opportunity to replant a few trees yet this year. It would be in the fall though.
Okay, that sounds good, Rick. And if that does not work, we can probably discuss this back at council to address these issues so that folks, at least we're doing our proper maintenance in the city for cutting trees, we're replanting them. Okay, thank you.
And council members, I'm just going to respectfully mention, we've got another item before we need to adjourn the work session. And kind of sitting here listening to discussion, we got a lot of committee work going on with this. And you can call the question. So we have a first and a second to call the question. That will take a 2/3 vote. It is non-debatable. Please call the roll on calling the question.
Who seconded that?
I did.
Okay. Councilmember Boat,
Yes.
Councilmember Bertolino,
Yes.
Councilmember Dodwell, Councilmember Remy,
Yes.
Councilmember Edens,
Yes.
Councilmember Bros,
Yes.
Councilmember Garitano,
Yes.
Councilmember Worthing,
Yes, only if we can have the full motion repeated, because some of us didn't hear it on Zoom.
Councilmember Werther, it's a yes or no, please, on the motion to vote immediately. How's your
You've
vote?
gotten my yes. I made the request to repeat the full motion on Zoom for those who didn't hear it.
Okay, my apology. It's a motion to vote. The motion is to vote immediately. It takes a 2/3 vote. It's non-debatable.
I've got that. It's the other motion that's on the floor.
The motion that's on the floor.
One I
Okay.
believe made by
Okay, thank
Councilmember
you.
Raymond.
Thank you. The motion that's on the floor is to move forward with the $25,000 for treatment, but to delay the $50,000 for removal until the first meeting in March of 2020. And how do you vote on the motion to vote immediately?
Oh, I already said yes.
Okay, great. Yes.
Councilmember Jordan,
Yes.
Councilmember McCutcheon,
Yes.
Councilmember Farmer,
Yes.
Councilmember Dillard,
Yes.
Councilmember Bartoni,
Yes.
Councilmember Stevens,
Just a point of clarification, would this be delaying the $50,000? Would that be on top of the regular $75,000 it's planned to
This
be
motion
spent
is to
next
vote
year?
immediately, so that's not a relevant question to this motion. That would be a question on the main motion. And as stated, 50,000 for removal would be delayed until next year. 25,000 only for retreatment would be done now. But that doesn't relate to this motion.
Well, that relates to the amount that we would spend next year, correct?
And that's the main motion. We'll come back to in a moment when we vote immediately.
Abstain then, I don't know.
One abstention.
Councilmember McCune,
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So the motion to vote immediately has passed. And so Councilor Stevens, to your question, and again, this is the same answer for, I think for Councilor Werther's question, which is the motion which now needs to have an immediate vote is to spend 25,000 immediately on the treatment of the ash trees and delay the decision on the $50,000 for removal until the first meeting of the council in March of 2021. Since the motion to vote immediately has passed, the council will now vote immediately on that motion. An affirmative vote is to proceed as the motion was made. Please call the roll.
Well, will this be an encumbrance out of this year's budget, or will this go
We
be
can't
next
have
year's
any
budget?
further discussion, Councilor Stevens. I'm sorry, because the motion to vote immediately was.
So we
passed.
have no idea where the money's coming from. Okay.
Please call the roll.
Councilmember Bertolino,
Yes.
Councilmember Dodwell,
Yes.
Councilmember Remy,
Yes.
Councilmember Edens,
Yes.
Councilmember Bros,
Yes.
Councilmember Garitano,
Yes.
Councilmember Werther,
Aye.
Councilmember Jordan. I'm sorry, you're on mute.
Yes.
Councilmember McCutcheon,
Yes.
Councilmember Farmer,
Yes.
Councilmember Dillard,
Yes.
Councilmember Bartoni,
No.
Councilmember Stevens,
Abstain. It's ridiculous.
Councilmember McCune,
Yes.
Councilmember Boat,
Yes.
Okay, so the motion carries. Moving next, the last item on the work session agenda is the, also with you, Rick, the city contractor agreement for the 2020 resurfacing project. What is it you are looking for from the council to do relative to this item this evening, Rick?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor and council members, the department is presenting a recommendation to award our 2020 resurfacing project to NDUS Contracting Company. I should let you know that we did already place on the agenda on the regular session Bill 2560, which is the legislation that would execute the city contractor agreement for the 2020 resurfacing project. Total liabilities and expenses to the city under this agreement would be no more than $650,000. NB West was the low bidder for our bid that was completed in March of this year. The project will resurface Fox Creek Road, St. Paul Road, Orville Road, as well as Viola Gill Lane. And I'm available for any questions that you may have.
So Rick, since this is on the main meeting, what is it you're looking, is this just informational, or what is it you're looking, just a selection of the contractor, or what is it you're wanting the council to do with this now?
Well, I think the idea, Mr. Mayor, was that since this bid was not discussed at the Admin and Public Works Committee directly, that we felt it ought to be presented for action to the full council. So if there is any opposition to moving forward with this agreement, the council could certainly make that motion at this point, and then we could avoid taking action on the bill at regular session. And I'll defer to City Administrator Anselm if he has any other comments on that.
And so that's, I'm not sure, that's a little, I mean, we've got a bill on the agenda relating to this. And really, I mean, if the council votes to approve this at this point, then that would just be duplicitous with what they would do, I guess, at the main meeting, right, Rick?
I beg your pardon, Mr. Mayor, I didn't quite understand what you said.
If the council voted to approve moving forward, as you've indicated in this memo for work session, would it not be duplicitous or redundant for them to then do the same thing as to the bill when presented at the main meeting?
Yeah, I think the idea would be if the council does not want to move forward, then a motion in that nature would be recommended. Otherwise, it is on the agenda for passage at the regular session.
Mayor, I think he would like to be able to give us the opportunity, if we did not want to have this voted on in our regular meeting, we didn't want to even go forward.
Okay.
We could do so now.
Okay. We would still need a motion to post. I mean, it's posted with the agenda, so we would need a motion to postpone. All right. So I think I see where you're headed here. So the issue then, I guess, before the council is whether there's any opposition to moving forward with this, although we're going to have another line to that.
Yeah, I was willing to make a motion that we would proceed with the recommendation.
Okay, I mean, that's a way to do it. So we have a motion to proceed with the recommendation, seconded by Councilmember Dodwell. Councilmember Stevens.
I see two prices on this. Is there a third bid?
Rick, could you respond to Councilmember Stevens, please?
Yes, sir. We only received 2 bidders for this project, and that has been consistent, council member, with several years now. This product is only applied by 2 contractors in the St. Louis area. I will say that the bid by MB West for their work has been in the $5 a square yard range. So it's fairly consistent and uniform with their past bids.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions for Rick? Comments or discussion on the motion? The motion is to move forward as recommended, and this will be on the council's agenda for the main meeting. See no further discussion. All those in, I'm sorry, Councilmember Garetano?
Sorry, did you have a second on that motion?
You did, Councilmember Donovan. Thank you for that question. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so Rick, there's your answer. I think that bill will probably pass when it comes before the council. All right, I think that brings us to conclusion of the work session. And so all that's left is an adjournment made by Councilmember Farmer. Is there a second? Made by Councilmember Remy. Not in favor, all in favor of the motion to adjourn, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so it's a couple of minutes before 7. We'll take about a 5-minute or so break, and then we'll come back and convene the first session of the city council for the meeting. Thank you. All right, I'd like to call to order the meeting of the council, the first session for the city of Wildwood for Monday, June 22nd, 2020. Ms. Eldridge, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Bullen,
Here.
Councilmember Stevens,
Here.
Councilmember McCune,
Here.
Councilmember Boat, Councilmember Boat. You're on mute.
So John, your Councilmember Boak, you're on mute. Do you know how to unmute your device there?
Can you hit the space bar on your keyboard?
Can you hit your space bar? We're just going to have to move forward. I'm sorry.
Councilmember Bertolino,
Here.
Councilmember Dodwell,
Here.
Councilmember Remy,
Present.
Councilmember Edens,
Here.
Councilmember Gross,
Here.
Councilmember Gaetano,
Here.
Councilmember Whither,
Present.
Councilmember Jordan,
Here.
Councilmember Hutchins,
Here.
Councilmember Farmer,
Here.
Councilmember Dillard,
Here.
Councilmember Bartoni,
Here.
Councilmember Gargani, Councilmember Boat.
Okay, thank you. For those of you who are comfortably able, if you would please stand for the saying of our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, and I want to especially welcome members of the public that are with us this evening, both on Zoom and in the council chambers tonight. As you can tell, we are gradually moving back into in-person meetings, so thank you for being here. I also would like to recognize Mr. Trey Trapani, who is from Ward 7. He's a sophomore at the Lafayette High School here in Wildwood. He has been shadowing me as an intern for the past few weeks, so Trey, welcome. We're glad to have you. Next on the agenda item is the approval of minutes from Council's June 8, 2020 work session and regular meeting. If there are no questions or comments on the minutes, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes as presented. Made by Councilmember McCune, seconded by Councilmember Edens. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion, all in favor of the motion to approve the minutes as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Moving next into public participation, I believe we do have a few people with us this evening, so I'm just going to mention a couple of things about that. Public comment is a valuable component of our meeting. Anyone who wishes to speak must complete a speaker card and provide it to the city clerk, who is seated to your left of the podium. When your name is called, please approach the podium and state your name and ward. To ensure that all who wish to speak have the opportunity to do so, there are a 5-minute time limitation, and I will let you know when the time limit is reached. If you have any questions for us, please mention that during your remarks. Identify the official you would like to respond. That official will make note of it, and at the conclusion of public participation, any official who chooses to respond will have 3 minutes to do so as to all questions directed to that official. The official may choose to respond to your questions after tonight's meeting. We may also post any responses from the official on the City Council page of our website. And finally, please be respectful to others in making your remarks. This means that interrupting others and using profane and abusive language are prohibited. And I want to thank everyone in advance for complying with these. First speaker card, please.
Andy Irvine wishing to comment about zoning code and ordinance violations and more.
You can do as you wish. It's recommended, but if you would want to take it off, you can do that if you think you can speak better.
My name is Andy Irvin, and I am a Ward 1 resident. And I'd like to congratulate Teresa on joining, or Larry on the council from Ward 1. Reason I'm here tonight is the continuing situation with the code and ordinance violations at 542 Etherton Road. I'd like to read something. This is from the Clayton, Missouri website. It's called "What is Zoning?" It's just an excerpt. The primary purpose of zoning is to ensure that adjacent land uses are compatible with one another. Zoning helps bring about orderly growth and change, controls population density, and helps create attractive, healthy communities. It also helps assure property owners and residents that the characteristics and property values of nearby areas will remain stable. Zoning codes have two specific functions. First, they regulate the use of particular property by describing the types of uses that are allowable. Second, they control the dimensions of structures that can be placed on the property, often called development standards, such as height, setbacks, lot size, and density. I think that's something we ought to all keep in mind, because what's going on with the violators next door is that they were informed before they purchased the property they could not bring their businesses into a non-urban residential only zone neighborhood. They did it anyway. All of the neighbors were shown drawings for the first SCUP permit of a oversized barn that was approved by the city of Wildwood based on the neighbors approving the drawing we were shown. And then subsequently, the violator just took that drawing up to planning and zoning and had it completely changed. And it's now a commercial structure with big tractor truck doors on the sides, and 75% of the property is gravel. And it should be noted too that when this is not a neighbor dispute, all right? These are clear violations of code and ordinances that have been allowed to continue for nearly 2 years. The code enforcement officers decided to give the violator back the deposit on the building, even though he had never finished putting back the yard the way it was, putting out cedar straw, taking down the silt fence. Turns out that over a year later, he never even had a final inspection by the St. Louis County. So they came out and put a do not occupy notice on his building after he'd been running his business out of there for well over a year. So I am asking Larry, and I'm asking you, Mr. Mayor, to ask Joe Vunich, what is going on here? I know this. Regarding the issuance of summons, Wildwood Ordinance 415.570D1, Joe has performed all the required items to lead to the following in conclusion. The last sentence is, the prosecuting attorney shall sign the original copy of all such summons, and the original thereof shall be forwarded to the clerk of the municipal court for inclusion on the court's docket for the date shown on the summons. Why is this now taking place after nearly 2 years? Why can't the summons be signed by the prosecuting attorney as written by Joe and be presented by Joe now once a court date is assigned? Other court dates are happening. Why is the prosecuting attorney reviewing the violations cited? This is something we need to know. This is, it clearly states that it's Joe's job, not the prosecuting attorney. So I'd like to get the answers to these questions. If you could ask Joe, all right? And I think that just about does it. Thanks.
Thank you. And I misspoke. The masks are actually optional, not recommended. So you were fine there, Mr. Irvine. Next speaker card, please.
John Gunther wishing to comment about the new bridge replacement at Etherton Road and Home Creek.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to address you. I'd like to talk about the bridge replacement currently under construction at Old Etherton Road and Bonham Creek in the historic area of Orville. I want to express my grave concerns over this project. I've documented it, its current conditions. I've prepared a presentation which I offer to all of you to see at your convenience and when you have time, as well as all the new incoming council members. The old bridge, which was there, was slightly narrower than the road that you see today. As such, interestingly, it was something of a traffic calming device. People would slow down a little bit and let people pass if there were two cars at one time. The new bridge is going to be 2 full lanes wide, along with sidewalks on each side. So it's actually twice as wide as the current bridge. It's going to be 4 feet higher to the slab of the grade and additional height in terms of its guardrails. It's basically 2 times the width of Etherton Road. And when I was out there looking at it, it's actually shifted off center of Etherton Road. So it actually will be going towards the historic country schoolhouse, which is now a resident, to its east. I'm a member of the Wildwood Erosion Task Force, and we've been studying storm erosion for over a year now. And we've been talking about best practices, which we know about here in the city. Bonham Creek, if you go look at it, has massive riprap up and down the sides of the banks. The vegetation has been removed, and these massive riprap limestone rock has been placed there. Alongside the road, it's actually so thick and so steep, it rolls into the stream bed, thereby decreasing the volume of that stream, increasing its speed when the water will come through, and the damage potential. So what we have basically is a wider bridge, wider pavement to and from, sidewalks, a lot of riprap, a lot of impervious surface has been added, which is actually going to be working against us in terms of trying to control stormwater. And the fact that it's in Orville, a historic area dating back to some beautiful architecture there from 1867, I think is ruining the scale and proportion and feel of that historic area. I would contend that this is not a public improvement, but a step backward. It will negatively impact our community and citizens. We are going contrary to what Wildwood stands for and what we know to be best practices. So I would put it to you to take time, study this, ask why was this bridge needed to be replaced in the first place? And then who designed it? How was it reviewed and approved? Is it possible to hold this and get some answers before the destruction continues? I would end by saying we would all do well if we just followed the proverb, first, do no harm. How can we do things in a more sensitive way here? Thank you all.
Thank you. Next speaker card, please.
I don't have any speaker cards, but I'll defer to Mr. Anselm if there's anyone via Zoom.
Anyone on Zoom? That we're doing public participation only in the building tonight, but good. All right. Thanks to both of you who came tonight to speak. Moving into mayor appointments and announcements. This is when every year the mayor under our ordinance gives the state of the city. Our city is in one of the best positions it has been in its history. Not only have we successfully weathered the COVID-19 health crisis that has affected the entire country, we responded in significant ways to both help and protect our residents and businesses. At no cost to the city, we are in the process of delivering high-speed internet access to 91% of our rural residents without it, who work and study from home. And we expanded seating and event options for our restaurants and similar businesses through ordinance suspension to help them reopen. We have also made progress in resolving another long-standing Wildwood item, the Lake Chesterfield drainage. We have scheduled additional meetings with Lake Chesterfield stakeholders to assess the results of the geophysical surveys and establish a workable plan of action at minimal cost to the city that for the first time will be based on reliable scientific data. Let's choose a course for even more positive and measurable actions that will benefit Wildwood's greatest asset, its residents. Let's do this by working together to achieve these 5 additional goals for them. 1, protecting trees and wooded areas in our developments. 2, increasing residential lot sizes in town center. 3, protecting 3-acre minimums. 4, expanding conflict of interest rules and limiting the use of residents' private information. And 5, developing workable solutions for erosion occurring around creeks and streams. Let's also continue to complete the smaller but equally noticeable things that promote pride of ownership and investment in our city. Keeping our primary roadways clean from debris and expanding our beautification initiatives are 2 of the most important ways to do this. And finally, let us achieve all of these goals with unprecedented integrity and professionalism for each one of our 35,517 residents. Thank you.
started, but we didn't want to interrupt you. There was a question by Ms. Gunther we were going to respond to.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, go ahead. My apologies.
So thank you, Mr. Gunther, for coming and speaking tonight. I do want to say that Mr. Gunther and some other members of this task force have done a yeoman's job of actually the last couple of days really stepping up and bringing these concerns to us. I just want to respond to his question. His question was, why was this approved? And so just to let you know that this exact question is being evaluated with a root cause analysis by by the city administrator, Mr. Vunich and Mr. Brown. And we hope to have an answer for that and decipher what the next best step might be. And then in response to that, so that moving forward, we don't have these sorts of issues, we think that it's about time that we have meetings of P&Z, the Architectural Board, and the Erosion Task Force moving forward so that we can harmonize a lot of the different ordinances so that we don't get ourselves into these predicaments again. Thank you.
There you go.
So bear with me. We have an administrator who's working all the microphones for us. And so the surprise mutes are to get to not have reverb for those who may be listening and participating by Zoom. I was just saying we have the public hearings. Thank you, Councilmember Remy, for raising that, making that answer. We have no public hearings. Moving into legislation, we have one unfinished bill for the first session. It is Bill 2559. And it is before the council for final passage, and it concerns Ward 6. Is there a motion for the second reading of the bill? Made by Councilmember Jordan. Is there a second? Made by Councilmember Garetano. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Ms. Eldridge, please read Bill 2559.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Wildwood, Missouri, hereby authorizing the mayor of the City of Wildwood, Missouri to execute any and all necessary and required documents to accept the donation of an approximately 27-acre site from Ms. Joanna Yost as future park property of the community and for it to be named Portner Park, with said acceptance being undertaken with deep gratitude to her. Second reading.
Okay, thank you. Is there any, Joe, do you have any, Joe Vinich, anything you would like to mention relative to Bill 2559?
No, sir, Mr. Mayor, but the department is available to answer any questions or respond to comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Does any member of the council have any questions or comments? Councilmember McCune.
So Joe, just one more question for you. Have we received any studies or anything? Have we moved forward on the environmental issues or anything on this?
Phase 1 environmental assessment is about to start. We're hopeful it'll get underway very quickly. But as I mentioned 2 weeks ago, Councilmember McCune, there's a provision in the legislation that would allow us not to accept the property if the Phase 1 environmental assessment showed problem or problems. And if that were to occur, then the matter would be returned to City Council for discussion and reevaluation. Thank you.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, seeing none, Ms. Eldridge, please call the roll for final passage of Bill 2559.
Councilmember Remy?
Yes.
Councilmember Jordan?
Yes.
Councilmember Brose?
Yes.
Councilmember Garetano?
Yes.
Councilmember Werther?
Aye.
Councilmember Jordan?
Yes.
Councilmember McCutcheon?
Yes.
Councilmember Farmer?
Yes.
Councilmember Dillard?
Yes.
Councilmember Bartoni?
Yes.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember McCune?
Yes.
Councilmember Boat?
Yes.
That's a yes.
Councilmember Boat, could you please vote?
Seven.
Councilmember Bruno?
Yes.
Councilmember Delavallo?
Yes.
Okay, so Bill 2559 has passed. We are now moving into the new business on the first session, and I know that I can hear people outside, and yet I don't see people are in the foyer, but I don't see people outside. So if there's no objection, we'll take a 5-minute break so the city administrator can make sure any guests we have that are in the council chambers can get to a point where they can, within our guidelines or code protection, visualize and hear the proceedings. So without objection, we'll take a 5-minute break for that to occur. Thank you. Okay. John. All right, thank you for that. Just wanted to get our guests situated. Moving into new business, we have two items. The first item is the certification of the June 2, 2020 municipal election results. City Attorney Young, I always like to know how we need to do this legally, so can you please let the council know what the motion should be relative to this item?
Thank you, Mayor. At this point, all the role of the city council here is to accept the certified election results. So a motion to accept those certified election results would be appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Dodwell?
I'll make that motion.
Give a motion to accept the results of the June 2, 2020 election, seconded by Councilmember Eaton. Is there any discussion on the motion to accept the election results? Councilmember Remy?
Just one question that's come up with the terms, anything the village term in response to how long their term will be, given the fact that they're starting later than normal term course.
City Attorney Young,
Could you please respond to Mr. Ray's question relative to that?
The term would expire at the next, in the election held in 2 years.
Can't hear.
I'll repeat that. The term would expire at the next general municipal election in 2 years.
So in essence, unlike typical elections, they will be a few months short from their term. So thank you. Thank you for the question.
Can't hear.
Councilmember Jordan, were you able to hear me or the city attorney, or could you not hear either one? I think she said we can't see or hear. We can't hear her. I think it's her connection. Okay. So we have a motion and a second to accept, seeing no further discussion, the June 2nd, 2020 election results. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Right, motion carries. So that takes us to the last item of new business for this first session, which is the swearing in. City Clerk Eldridge, how would you like to proceed with that? Sure. Well, are you going to do one at a time, or do you want to do, so you're going to do me and then the council, you're going to do one at a time, or how are you going to do? Okay, so for COVID reasons, we'll do one at a time in case their family wants to participate. So I guess you want me to come down. All right.
Yes. Mayor-elect, if you would please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Jim Boland,
I, Jim Boland,
being first duly sworn on my oath,
being first duly sworn on my oath,
state that I possess all the qualifications
state that I possess all the qualifications
prescribed by law
prescribed by law
for the office of mayor of the city of Wildwood,
the office of mayor of the city of Wildwood,
St. Louis County, state of Missouri,
St. Louis County, state of Missouri,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the state of Missouri,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the state of Missouri,
the provisions of the charter of the city,
provisions of the charter of the city,
and all applicable laws of this state,
and all applicable laws of this state,
and the ordinances and laws of the city of Wildwood,
and the ordinances and laws of the city of Wildwood,
St. Louis County,
St. Louis County,
state of Missouri,
and
faithfully demean myself of the office of mayor for the city of Wildwood.
and faithfully demean myself to the office of mayor for the city of Wildwood.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Ward one? Yeah, Ward one.
Councilmember-elect, if you could please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Teresa Clark,
Being first duly sworn on my oath,
being first duly sworn on my oath,
state that I possess all the qualifications
state that I possess all the qualifications
prescribed by law for the office of council member of the city of Wildwood,
prescribed by law for the office of council member of the city of Wildwood,
St. Louis County, state of Missouri,
St. Louis County, state of Missouri,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the state of Missouri,
and the state of Missouri,
the provisions of the charter of the city,
the provisions of the charter of the city,
and all applicable laws of this state,
and all applicable laws of this state,
and the ordinances and laws of the city of Wildwood, St. Louis County, state of Missouri,
and the ordinances and laws of the city of Wildwood, St. Louis County, state of Missouri,
and faithfully demean myself of the office of council member for the city of Wildwood.
and faithfully demean myself of the office of council member for the city of Wildwood.
Congratulations.
Ward 2.
Okay, Councilmember-elect, if you could please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Don Bartoni,
Being first duly sworn on my oath,
being first duly sworn on my oath,
state that I possess all the qualifications prescribed by law
state that I possess all the qualifications prescribed by law
for the office of council member of the city of Wildwood, St. Louis County, state of Missouri,
for the office of the city council member of the city of Wildwood, St. Louis County, state of Missouri,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the state of Missouri,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the state of Missouri,
the provisions of the charter of the city,
the provisions of the charter of the city,
and all applicable laws of this state,
and all applicable laws of the state,
and the ordinances and laws of the city of Wildwood, St. Louis County, state of Missouri,
and the ordinances and laws of the city of Wildwood, St. Louis County, state of Missouri,
and faithfully demean myself of the office of council member for the city of Wildwood.
and faithfully demean myself of the office of council member for the city of Wildwood.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Ward 4 or 3? Sorry. Councilmember-elect, if you could please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Tracy Nine,
I, Tracy Nyan,
being first duly sworn on my oath,
being first duly sworn on my oath,
state that I possess all the qualifications
state that I possess all the qualifications
prescribed by law for the office of council member
prescribed by law for the office of council member
of the city of Wildwood, St. Louis County, state of Missouri,
of the city of Wildwood, St. Louis County, state of Missouri,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the state of Missouri,
and the state of Missouri,
the provisions of the charter of the city,
provisions of the charter of the city,
and all applicable laws of this state,
and all applicable laws of this state,
and the ordinances and laws of the city of Wildwood, St. Louis County, state of Missouri,
and the ordinances, laws of the city of Wildwood, St. Louis County, state of Missouri,
and faithfully demean myself of the office of council member for the city of Wildwood.
and faithfully demean myself of the office of council member for the city of Wildwood.
Thank you. Thank you. Councilmember-elect, if you could please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Joe Farmer,
Being first duly sworn on my oath,
being first duly sworn on my oath,
state that I possess all of the qualifications
state that I possess all of the qualifications
prescribed by law for the office of council member of the city of Wildwood,
prescribed by law for for the office of City Council Member of the City of Wildwood,
St. Louis County, State of Missouri,
St. Louis County, State of Missouri,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the state of Missouri,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the state of Missouri,
the provisions of the Charter of the city,
the provisions of the Charter of the City,
and all applicable laws of this state,
and all applicable laws of this state,
and the ordinances and laws of the city of Wildwood, St. Louis County, state of Missouri,
and the ordinances and laws of the City of Wildwood, St. Louis County, State of Missouri,
and faithfully demean myself of the office of council member for the city of Wildwood.
and faithfully demean myself of the office of council member of the City of Wildwood.
Congratulations. Councilmember-elect, if you could please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Deborah Smith McCutcheon,
Being first duly sworn on my oath,
first being duly sworn on my oath,
state that I possess all the qualifications prescribed by law
state that I possess all the qualifications prescribed by law
for the office of council member of the city of Wildwood, St. Louis County, state of Missouri,
for the office of council member of the city of Wildwood, St. Louis County, state of Missouri,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the state of Missouri,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the state of Missouri,
the provisions of the charter of the city,
the provisions of the charter of the city,
and all applicable laws of this state,
and all the applicable laws of the state,
and the ordinances and laws of the city of Wildwood, St. Louis County, state of Missouri,
and the ordinances and laws of the city of Wildwood, St. Louis County, state of Missouri,
and faithfully demean myself of the office of council member for the city of Wildwood.
and faithfully demean myself of the office of council member for the city of Wildwood.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Now we're set.
Councilmember-elect, if you could please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Rob Rambo,
Being first duly sworn on my oath,
being first duly sworn on my oath,
state that I possess all the qualifications prescribed by law
state that I possess all the qualifications prescribed by law
for the office of council member
for the office of council member
of the city of Wildwood, St. Louis County, state of Missouri,
of the City of Wildwood, St. Louis County, State of Missouri,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the state of Missouri,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the state of Missouri,
the provisions of the charter of the city,
the provisions of the charter of the city,
and all applicable laws of this state,
and all applicable laws of this state,
and the ordinances and laws of the city of Wildwood, St. Louis County, state of Missouri,
and the ordinances and laws of the City of Wildwood, St. Louis County, State of Missouri,
and faithfully demean myself of the office of council member for the city of Wildwood.
and faithfully demean myself of the office of the council member for the City of Wildwood.
Congratulations. Thank you. Councilmember-elect, if you could please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Dan Flasher,
Being first duly sworn on my oath,
being first duly sworn on my oath,
state that I possess all of the qualifications
state that I possess all the qualifications
prescribed by law for the office of council member
prescribed by law for the office of council member
of the city of Wildwood, St. Louis County, state of Missouri,
of the City of Wildwood, St. Louis County, State of Missouri,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the state of Missouri,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the state of Missouri,
the provisions of the charter of the city,
the provisions of the charter of the city,
and all applicable laws of this state,
and all applicable laws of the state,
and the ordinances and laws of the city of Wildwood, St. Louis County, state of Missouri,
and the ordinances and laws of the City of Wildwood, St. Louis County, State of Missouri,
and faithfully demean myself of the office of council member for the city of Wildwood.
and faithfully demean myself of the office of council member for the City of Wildwood.
Congratulations. Councilmember-elect, if you could please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Mike Kalani,
Being first duly sworn on my oath,
being first duly sworn on my oath,
state that I possess all the qualifications
state that I possess all the qualifications
prescribed by law for the office of council member
prescribed by law for the office of council member,
of the city of Wildwood, St. Louis County, state of Missouri,
the city of Wildwood, St. Louis County, state of Missouri,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the state of Missouri,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the state of Missouri,
the provisions of the charter of the city,
the provisions of the charter of the city,
and all applicable laws of this state,
and all applicable laws of this state,
and the ordinances and laws of the city of Wildwood, St. Louis County, state of Missouri,
and the applicable laws of the state of and ordinance of the laws of the city of Wildwood, St. Louis County, state of Missouri,
and faithfully demean myself of the office of council member for the city of Wildwood.
and faithfully demean myself of the office of council member for the city of Wildwood.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So Councilmember Clark, Councilmember Bartoni, Councilmember Nyhan, Councilmember Farmer, Councilmember McCutcheon, Councilmember Rambo, Councilmember Flasher, and Councilmember Galani. Congratulations on behalf of all of us. So with that, that concludes our first session. We'll take a break and come back to the second session. Councilmember Remy.
Just a point of order, we've got some outgoing council members and we want to just thank them all for their service for the last 2 years.
That's on the list. Thank you. So we do have some council members who are leaving us this evening. Councilmember Werther, Councilmember Dillard, Councilmember Jordan, Councilmember Greg Nani, who's not with us tonight. I think, did I miss anyone? I think that's it. And I want to thank Councilmember Stevens, my apology. And I want to thank you for, I'm sorry. I did mention him, got it. So I think we got everyone, and I want to thank you for your time while you were on the council. So with that, I would entertain a motion. With that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn the first session of the council, made by Councilmember Dodwell, second by Councilmember Bartoni, non-debatable. All in favor of the motion to adjourn, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? So we will adjourn the first session. We'll come back in about 10 minutes or so for the second session, and we will obviously have different seating. Thank you very much. All right, council members, we're going to start with the second session. I'm sorry. Okay.
Are you taking
Yeah, just the majority.
Yeah, this one, I took it.
Okay, good evening and welcome. I would like to call to order the second session of the City Council for the City of Wildwood for Monday, June 22nd, 2020. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Bullen.
Here.
Councilmember Garitano. Councilmember Flasher.
Here.
Councilmember Boat.
Here.
Councilmember Bartolino.
Here.
Councilmember Dowsett.
Here.
Councilmember Nyan. Councilmember Bartoni.
Here.
Councilmember Bruce.
Here.
Councilmember Clark. Here. Councilmember Edens.
Here.
Councilmember Remy.
Here.
Councilmember Farmer.
Here.
Councilmember Galani.
Here.
Councilmember McCune. Here. Councilmember Rainbow.
Here.
Councilmember McCutcheon.
Okay, thank you and welcome again. Just a couple of housekeeping items here. Councilmember Nyhan will need your video on since you'll be voting by law. We'll have video on for you. That goes for any other councilmember, not picking on her. I also want to welcome Trey Trapani to our meeting this evening. As you know, he is a Wildwood resident from Ward 7. He's a sophomore at Lafayette High School. He's been shadowing me and doing an internship for the past few weeks. And Trey, thanks so much for being here and welcome. Public participation, do we have any speaker cards? So there's no speaker cards. All right. So we'll move into mayor announcements and appointments. One thing I want to mention as a housekeeping item for the council is the seating arrangement and how we got here and how we're going to navigate this going forward to be as fair as possible to every member of the council. So as you know, the reason we have a bifurcated place here this evening as opposed to everyone sitting at the dais is because of the COVID distancing that we need to follow. So in order to accommodate every member of the council as fairly as possible, what I decided to do was to start with an alpha for tonight, alpha order from each ward. The council member who comes first in alphabet will sit at the dais, and the next one who doesn't will sit down at the table below the dais. So if you're sitting at the dais, that means that your name comes first, an alpha last name in alpha order for your council. At the next council meeting, we will reverse that. So we will just alternate. That way everyone has a fair chance to sit in both places. So those of you who are sitting at the tables below the dais will sit at the dais next meeting and vice versa in the reverse. And then the last thing, not to overcomplicate this, but if one of your council members is absent that particular evening and you're sitting in either place, if you'd rather sit at the place where the council member would typically sit that night, you're free to take that place. So for example, if Councilmember Garitano wasn't here, Councilmember Galani could say, you know, I'm gonna go take his place and vice versa. So if a place is open, you're free to do that. But that's how we'll do it, just alternating. And hopefully that will be as fair as possible. It's the best thing I could come up with. Councilmember Bartoni.
So is the plan moving forward though to still have
Is the plan moving forward to still have the option to participate via Zoom?
I haven't decided that yet, and I want to talk with the city administrator and wait and see what some of the orders that come out of St. Louis County entail before I make that decision. So as I sit here tonight, I don't have a decision made on that. And thank you for the question. Okay, any questions on the seating arrangement or the meetings? All right, well, thank you for your indulgence, and I hope that you will work with us on it, and we'll make it through it. And at some point, we will hopefully all be sitting back at the dais like we were. All right. Okay, moving into appointments. The first is Mayor Pro Tem. I did see an email, I believe, from Councilmember Remy that was provided to the city clerk, city administrator, me nominating Councilmember Garitano for that position. That's correct, Councilmember Remy? Okay, you're muted, I believe.
Yes, I am recommending and nominating Councilmember Garrettano.
Okay, Councilmember Bartoni. Okay, so we have a second. Are there any other nominations from the floor? I didn't receive any other emails. Are there any other nominations for Mayor Pro Tem? Okay, seeing no other nominations, I guess we could do this by acclamation, could we not?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so if there's no objection, no vote will be necessary simply because there is one person who's been nominated for it and only one. Okay, then we won't do it by acclamation. Okay, so strike that. We'll vote on the motion. So all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Councilmember Garrettano, thank you so much and for your willingness to serve the city in the capacity as Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you very much for the nomination and your trust in serving in this position. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving next to the City Council Liaison to the Planning and Zoning Commission, for the benefit of Trey, who's with us tonight, and others that may not be aware, there are two positions from this body that sit on the Planning and Zoning Commission, one by mandate, the other, in my case, by option. And in this instance, the City Council nominates someone from among its ranks to sit as a voting member of the Planning and Zoning Commission. In that regard, I believe I also saw in Councilmember Remy's email that you were nominating Councilmember Bros for the position. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Is there any other nomination from the floor? Anyone else who wish to? Councilmember McCune.
I would like to nominate Councilmember Farmer.
Okay, so we have a nomination of Councilmember Farmer for the position as well. And City Attorney Young, every year when we have more than one, I like to be sure that we're doing it properly in terms of how we procedurally go about it. So would you care to please explain to us how we should move forward with the nominations?
Yes, Mayor. In terms of the nominations, you would have a vote on the first nominated. If that vote passes, that person is elected. If that person is not elected by a majority of the council, you move on to the second nominated person.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other nominations? We have two, Councilmember Roast and Councilmember Farmer. Any other nominations? Okay, seeing none. So as the city attorney indicated, we will first, the council will first vote on the nomination of Councilmember Brost, and we'll do a roll call vote, and an affirmative vote, a yes vote, is in favor of Councilmember Brost. And as the city attorney said, if that fails, we'll then go to the next nominee. Please call the roll for Councilmember Brost to serve as the liaison from the council to Planning and Zoning Commission.
Councilmember Garrettano.
Yes.
Councilmember Flasher.
Yes.
Councilmember Bope.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Bope, we couldn't hear you.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Councilmember Bertolino.
Yes.
Councilmember Dodwell.
Yes.
Councilmember Nyan.
Yes.
Councilmember Bartoni.
Yes.
Councilmember Rose.
Yes.
Councilmember Clark.
Yes.
Councilmember Edens.
Yes.
Councilmember Remy.
Yes.
Councilmember Farmer.
Yes.
Councilmember Galani.
Yes.
Councilmember McCune.
Yes, I'll remove Farmer.
Now that you've been abandoned by the person, I can understand.
Councilmember Rambo.
Yes.
Councilmember McCutcheon.
Yes.
All right, congratulations, Councilmember Rose. And thank you, Councilmember McCune, for the nomination of Councilmember Farmer. And Councilmember Farmer, thank you for supporting Councilmember Rose. So, and we look forward to working with you on the Planning and Zoning Commission. Next is my place on the Planning and Zoning Commission. As I mentioned, at the option of the mayor, he or she can decide and elect to sit as a voting member of the Planning and Zoning Commission, and that decision is announced to the council at this time each year. And I've done that for the past 4 years, and I will continue to do that. Moving next to council standing committee assignments. We have 3 standing committees: Administration, Public Works, Planning and Parks, Economic Development. And those committee assignments are before you this evening. Do we need a motion and approve vote on this, City Attorney Young?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so we need a motion to approve made by Councilmember Farmer, seconded by Councilmember Garetano. Any discussion on the committee assignments? Seeing none, I think we'll try this by voice vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, those are approved. Next, the council committee liaisons. Those were also provided earlier, I believe late last week, to the council and posted with the agenda. These are liaisons: 2 to the Historic Preservation Commission, 2 to the Rural Internet Access Committee, and 1 to the Architectural Review Board. And those also, I believe, require council approval. So I would entertain a motion made by Councilmember Dodwell to approve. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Farmer. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, motion carries. Thank you. And last, council liaisons to the Board of Public Safety and the Wildwood Celebration Commission. Both of those are voting. I believe, is Wildwood Celebration Commission voting Councilmember Garetano position on the Wildwood Celebration Commission? Liaison only. Okay, Board of Public Safety is voting. The Wildwood Celebration Commission is non-voting as a liaison. And both of the nominees would be continuing Councilmember Bertolino and Councilmember Garetano. I would entertain a motion to approve those liaison assignments. Made by Councilmember Flasher, seconded by Councilmember Farmer. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, that motion carries. There are no public hearings. Moving into legislation, we have 1 item of new business for first reading. And as you may know, new members of the council, bills, before they can become an ordinance, must go through 2 readings. Those are typically done on different meetings. Usually the second reading follows the first meeting where it was read, although not always. Sometimes, as you may have observed in watching meetings, for various reasons, the bill can be advanced to have a second reading on the same night, and that takes a 2/3 vote. The only other thing I wanted to mention relative to first readings is that debate of the bill, questions can be entertained at a first reading, but debate on the bill, in other words, speaking in favor or against and making points and arguments in that regard, is reserved by ordinance only for the second reading. So not at the first reading, just questions and informational items at the first reading. And we'll cover some of this at the orientation tomorrow evening, but just wanted to mention that here with respect to this one. All right, so here we go. Bill 2560 is before the council. It's for first reading, and it concerns wards 1, 3, 6, and 8. Is there a motion for the first reading of the bill? Made by Councilmember Garetano, second by Councilmember Remy. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Seeing none, Ms. Eldridge, please read Bill 2560.
Bill 2560, an ordinance of the City of Wildwood, Missouri, hereby authorizing the mayor of the City of Wildwood, Missouri to execute a contract with NB West Contracting Company for the resurfacing of various public streets within the City of Wildwood, including traffic control and other incidental items as shown on the construction drawings and specifications.
Thank you. Director of Public Works, Rick Brown, do you have anything you'd like to mention relative to Bill 2560?
Thank you, Mayor. Just briefly, this bill will authorize
Okay.
the resurfacing project. The low bidder is NB West. And this project will resurface Fox Creek Road, St. Paul Road, Oval Road, as well as Viola Gill Lane. And the department is available for any questions at this time.
Okay, thank you, Rick. Does anyone have any questions for Rick? Councilmember Remy?
Just in deference for our new folks, would you just tell us a little bit about the Road and Bridge Fund?
I'm sorry, I wasn't able to hear that question. I think you're muted. Thank you.
Would you mind just telling us a little bit about the road and bridge fund?
I think the question was relative to the funding. This project is funded out of the Road and Bridge Fund.
So Rick, Councilmember Remy's asking if you would just give the council, and particularly the new council members, just a little background on the Road and Bridge Fund, the fund itself.
Well, we have two funds, and certainly our city administrator may want to speak to this as well. We have two funds that we use for capital improvement projects and improvements in the city of Wildwood. Most of the routine maintenance items now, from the Department of Public Works perspective, are funded out of Road and Bridge, and that is a fund that collects gas tax revenues that come our way through the state gas tax, as well as some other revenues that are associated with that. So we have been funding resurfacing work, our concrete street replacement project that it's an annual project out of that fund as well, and some other items that are within the budget. So if that provides a little bit of a summary.
Okay, thank you, Rick. We appreciate it. Any other questions for Rick? Any comments? If not, this will be on the council's agenda for its next meeting. All right, thank you. Seeing none. Moving next to resolutions, we don't have any, so that takes us to miscellaneous, and we have a couple of items. The first is approval of expenditures. And for the benefit of new council members, these expenditures are provided to you periodically by our city team members here at City Hall for approval, and it is required by ordinance that the council approve these expenditures. And so if you ever have any questions, we can entertain those here. All right, so any questions on the expenditures? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve the expenditures. Councilmember McCune.
So I don't know if it's Joe or City Administrator Anselm. The question I have relates to the line item for, it says COVID-19 restroom services. There's two expenses for $5,025. Can you tell me where that was placed or what that was for?
City Administrator Anselm, would you like to respond to that?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. Thank you, Councilmember.
It's a portable water closet.
Correct, yes.
Okay.
We, instead of, several cities have not actually opened their physical restroom facilities just because of the amount of time and effort it takes to clean those. So we found an alternative using portable water closets to actually have those restrooms cleaned. They can do it much more efficiently and effectively. They pretty much spray them and they're in and out in a relatively short period of time. So it's an effort to actually save some dollars, and through some reimbursement funds, we believe we'll be able to get reimbursed for these costs.
And that's a monthly fee?
Joe, you might be able to answer that.
It is a monthly fee, but the numbers you're seeing tonight are higher than normal. And that relates again to what the city administrator mentioned, is that with COVID-19, the coronavirus, we've closed our permanent facilities and we've added additional portable facilities at all of our trailhead and park properties. So once we open the restroom facilities, the permanent restroom facilities, you should see that number dip.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Reddy.
Rick, would you just mind telling us a little bit about why we purchased in June snow salt from the city of Chesterfield?
Yes, Councilmember Remy, that is a bill that comes through when we restock our stores of salt earlier this year. So it took a while for the bill to arrive our way, but it finally did, and so we're required to pay it, of course. So, but it's relative to our replenishment of our stock supplies.
All right. Any other questions? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve the expenditures made by Councilmember McCutcheon, second by Councilmember Bartoni. Is there any discussion on the motion to approve the expenditures? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. All right, that takes us to a receipt and file. We have one item, PZ 15-19, relative to the Chesterfield Montessori School. Joe Vintage, Director of Planning, would you like to speak to that?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Mr. Mayor and members of City Council, a week ago tonight, the Planning and Zoning Commission was asked by Chesterfield Montessori School to approve a site development plan for their outdoor education center, which will be located on State Route BA just south of State Route 109. Mr. Jack Wynn, our Economic Development Manager, is sharing the screen at this time. The intent is to use the 7+ acre property for outdoor education purposes. A small structure is planned for storage to provide cover from the elements, including the sun, and then also a parking area for drop-off and pickups. As you can see, the site has a portion of the floodway of Bonham Creek, as well as an extensive area of floodplain. All of the development activity, i.e. the disturbance, is to be outside the floodplain area. Mr. Brown did a very good job of working with the petitioner to ensure that they could do this small project in that corner of the site and still maintain our requirements relative to the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA. The item is presented to you tonight for your information. No action is required. If there are any questions or comments, the department would be glad to try to answer them at this time. Thank you.
Joe, thank you for that. And would you also mind explaining, particularly for the benefit of the new council members, why these are here in terms of the council's ability to pick up and do something different with it, so that they are aware of the substantive reason as to why we have these on the agenda?
With regards to conditional use permits, members of City Council and Mr. Mayor, there are really two roles that you serve. With the conditional use permit itself, the actual regulations, the Planning and Zoning Commission grants those regulations. It's an administrative act, but the City Council always has the authority to exercise power of review. So you will receive a conditional use permit or any amendments to it, and the Department of Planning will always remind you, you have 15 days to exercise power of review. With a conditional use permit, a site development plan is required. It's really the roadmap that tells everyone how they're going to use the site and adhere to the conditional use permit. These items, the site development plans, are presented to City Council so you can see that the permit's been adhered to. And if you get questions from your constituents, you have it available either to discuss it with them, forward it to them, or ask the department what the heck's going on.
All right, Councilmember Clark.
Yes, bear with me. This is my first time to speak. So I was just noticing, Joe, that under miscellaneous conditions in part of this paperwork that you sent out, it says the parking, circulation, other applicable site design features shall comply with Chapter 1101, Section 512.4, physically handicapped and aged of the SLCRO 1974 as amended. I was just wondering if this word handicapped is still going to be used. I was thinking that in maybe around 1986, that was taken out of our terminology. So just concerned about that being put on a sign that's put up for the parking.
Well, thank you for the question, Councilmember Clark. The actual designation of the spaces and signage associated with them, the accessible spaces, will reflect 2020 requirements, both for size, color, dimensions, and language. The as amended is the key component of the condition you just read, and we'll update that. It's a good point. It's probably the department being a little lazy, and it shouldn't be. So we'll find out what that new regulation is and recite it from this point forward correctly.
Thank you. And on the same line, along the same line, there was a letter where the supplier responded and said in number 18, dimensions noted on the plan. He says that per the parking requirements, accessible space has been provided, but not required to be designated as reserved for physical disabled. And since we are under 5 required spaces, this designation and reservation for disabled is not required. I was under the impression that 1 is required for under 25 spaces.
The city of Wildwood requires it regardless of what the federal standards may be. The fact that this is an educational facility and children at Chesterfield Montessori may have special needs or other situations will require it. So when you go by the facility, you'll see the required signage plus also the markings on the spaces themselves, as well as the appropriate sizes and the proper striping associated with it. I can guarantee you that.
Okay. Councilmember Rick.
Just one question, Joe. Looking at number 6 here, it says that a stormwater plan is not required. Just take me through exactly when that occurs, how we are evaluating these that may have met our previous criteria, but we're noticing now that some of these are fraught with problems going forward when we have a lot of them.
It's a very good question, Councilmember Remy. And again, in this particular instance, the Departments of Planning and Public Works worked with the designer and the petitioner. I guess the best explanation I can provide you, and certainly Mr. Brown can correct me if I misstate this, is that the site is over 7+ acres in size. So roughly speaking, over 300,000 square feet. Approximately 30,000 square feet is to be disturbed, all outside the floodway and floodplain. And the parking area or the accessible area, notwithstanding the accessible spaces, is intended to be gravel. So it's a pervious surface. So the calculation just didn't identify the need for it because again, we have a small area of land disturbance, pervious surface instead of impervious. And so collectively, the departments thought we had a solution.
Okay, any other questions for Joe? Right, so again, the council by ordinance has 15 days to do something different if it chooses to do that. I appreciate all the questions and thank you, Joe, for all the information.
You're welcome, sir, and thank you.
All right, so that is the last item under miscellaneous. I just wanted to say in closing a couple of thank yous here. First of all, to our city administrator, Sam Anselm. I don't want to take credit for his ideas that helped me work through the seating arrangements for this evening, and that's much appreciated to get it to a fair point. I also want to thank both Sam and Megan Eldridge, and who else worked really hard to get things going for our meeting tonight and all the, I'm sorry? And who I couldn't understand. And Joanne? Julian. Okay, thank you. The masks are inhibiting a little bit here. So, and thanks to Julian Jacqueline for his assistance in making all this happen for the council. So with that, thank you again, Councilmember Bartoni.
I just want to make, we've had a lot of discussions regarding,
We've had a lot of discussions about the budget and trying to save as much money as we can. I should be live.
This is going to.
Yeah. Okay. But just in Sam's email last Friday, just the decision you made to move the archives videos and save, we're saving a few $1,000s. Just, nice job for doing that. And thanks for doing that for the city.
Absolutely. Councilor Garetano.
Sure. I just want to make a comment here before we end the meeting to express my warm welcome to all our new council members here. And I am very excited for our city as we start this new council and administration here, and excited about the energy that this group brings to our residents. And I have full confidence that we're going to work and do a great job for our community. So welcome aboard to everyone. And this is a new page in the history of Wildwood. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Garitano. All right, anything further? Thanks to all of you, actually, both existing and incoming council members, for your willingness to serve the residents of this city as you do. Appreciate it. I know they appreciate it. Councilmember Garitano.
Yep. I'll make a motion to
We have a
adjourn.
motion to adjourn, second by Councilmember Bartoni, non-debatable. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Any abstentions? We stand adjourned. Thank you so much.